Welcome to today's Explainer. Let's jump right in, because I want you to ask yourself something right off the bat. Have you ever looked around your workplace, or maybe your kid's school, or even your local hospital, and just felt this strange disconnect? Like this lingering feeling that the official paperwork, the metrics, all those polished reports are describing a completely different reality than the one you are actually living through? Well, if so, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why our modern institutions feel so completely divorced from reality, and far more importantly, how we can actually fix it. Let's get into it.
We have built a world that rewards the appearance of competence over its practice. Take a second and just let that sink in. It's a pretty bold statement, right? But honestly, it hits the nail right on the head. Somewhere along the line, we literally replace the actual work with just tracking the work. We've let metrics, endless spreadsheets, and constant reporting completely drown out the actual substance of what we do every day.
So we're basically living in a world split in two. Over on one side, you have the official version. You know what I'm talking about. These are the massive policy binders written just to fill filing cabinets, the internal processes that aren't there to find the truth but simply to manage liability. It's all about looking good on paper. But then on the flip side, we have physical reality. This is the actual work being done by real people on the ground. It's the messy, unpolished, absolute truth of what really happened today. And the scary part? The gap between these two sides is getting wider and wider every single day.
And that gap is held in place by what we're calling the loud architecture of performance. I mean, just think about the sheer volume of metrics you deal with on a daily basis. It's deafening. The endless noise of compliance reporting, the frantic, non-stop pace of transactional management where literally everything is just a task to be checked off. This overwhelming volume acts like a giant brick wall. It completely buries the physical reality under a mountain of data, which stops any real human development dead in its tracks. And why? Because underneath all of that noise, we're just refusing to pay the necessary price for reality.
Which brings us to a highly uncomfortable question. Why did we actually stop paying for the truth? Why on earth do organizations gladly settle for this managed, liability-edited version of events instead of just looking at what's actually happening?
Well, the honest answer is that truth is incredibly expensive. First off, it costs time. Finding out what really happened takes way longer than just mindlessly ticking a compliance box. Second, it costs the vulnerability of being wrong. And let's be real, no leader likes to admit their system is failing. And third, and this is probably the biggest one, it costs operational terror. There is a genuine, deep-seated fear in management of discovering that the sanitized official version doesn't actually match physical reality. For the people whose entire job description is managing liability, the truth isn't just hard to find, it is actively terrifying.
Okay, so if the truth is that expensive and terrifying, organizations do what they do best. They optimize for the cost function they have. They actively suppress the truth to manage their liability. But we really have to ask ourselves, what actually happens when we do that? Do the problems just magically vanish because they didn't make it onto the official quarterly report?
Spoiler alert, absolutely not. The problems do not disappear. They compound. What starts off as a tiny, unexamined gap between policy and reality slowly snowballs into a massive, totally preventable crisis. And the most frustrating part is that these crises almost always could have been avoided by just one honest conversation, just one genuine investigation, just one leader brave enough to say, hey, what actually happened here, instead of demanding to know what should be recorded for HR.
Once you know what to look for, you start seeing this fake efficiency literally everywhere. Take healthcare, for example. Patient recovery is often bizarrely measured by the efficiency of a 15-minute appointment slot. Make it make sense, right? Or education, where a child's incredibly complex journey of learning gets boiled down to a single standardized test score. Or, and I'm sure you've been here, you're sitting in a highly structured, quote-unquote, productive corporate meeting, but the actual core issue dragging the entire team down is completely ignored because, well, it just doesn't fit the agenda. Think about your own life for a second. Where are you seeing these broken metrics entirely replace physical reality?
That corporate example perfectly captures what we can call the black hole meeting. Picture this. You're in a room where absolutely everyone knows the truth. Everyone knows the project is a disaster or the strategy is completely flawed. Yet, the conversation just safely orbits the issue. Nobody actually crosses the event horizon. Everyone carefully avoids the gravitational pull of the truth. Eventually, someone walks out and goes, well, that was productive. Meanwhile, the core issue is just sitting there silently in the center of the room, growing heavier and heavier by the minute. But then, every once in a while, somebody breaks orbit. These are the unsung truth speakers, and their role is absolutely crucial. It's that auditor who insists on asking the really uncomfortable questions that aren't on their checklist. It's the delivery driver who flat out refuses to speed up an unsafe vehicle just to satisfy some algorithm's route time. It's the teacher who tosses the mandated script to actually connect with a struggling student. Or that one brave employee in the black hole meeting who raises their hand and says, "Actually, I think we need to look at what really happened here." When they speak up, you can literally watch 30 faces in the room soften with profound relief, while the one person in charge stiffens with sheer dread.
It is so absolutely critical that we change how we view these individuals. These people are not troublemakers. They aren't just being difficult. They are simply the few people left who are still willing to bear the cost of reality that the rest of the organization is desperately trying to hide from. They are paying the price for the truth.
Which brings us to Section 1, the root cause, missing the big picture. Why do officials and managers consistently miss the deterioration of their own systems?
Well, it's not because leaders lack intelligence, and they definitely don't lack data. It's because they are entirely focused on optimizing the immediate. They're judged on quarterly figures, liability reports, and wrapping up complex problems into neat little simple categories. But the big picture? That requires distance. It requires immense patience. It demands a willingness to actually sit with complexity rather than just forcing it into a neat little spreadsheet cell. When you only optimize for the immediate, your system is going to slowly deteriorate completely unseen.
Moving to Section 2, the independent reckoning. Finding the truth. This is the practical, kind of radical step needed to pull an organization back to reality. So if you actually want to find the truth, step 1 is simple but incredibly hard for companies to stomach. Stop self-auditing. Internal reviews are always inevitably going to default to liability management. Step 2, bring in outside eyes. We're talking an independent body, a trade union, a genuinely neutral advocate. And step 3, don't just ask these outsiders to verify if your policies are legally compliant. Ask them to go down to the floor, talk to the driver, talk to the teacher, talk to the frontline employee, and find out if those policies are actually alive. Do the people those policies are meant to protect actually feel that protection? Let me tell you, that single, honest, independent reckoning would radically transform almost any organization in under a year.
And look, we have to be incredibly careful about the tools we bring into this independent reckoning, especially when we talk about new tech. Take AI, for example. AI is ultimately just a mirror of the intent behind it. If management uses AI as a penalizing tool, micromanaging employees' every movement to enforce broken policies, it just automates the noise. It multiplies the disease. But if leadership actually has the courage to use AI as a truth-seeking tool, an independent lens to audit the system itself and find the actual gaps between what is written and what is lived, well, then it becomes an unprecedented game changer for uncovering reality.
And finally, Section 3, towards human development. Reclaiming quality? How do we actually reclaim a world that values quality over sheer volume?
To do this, we have to undergo a massive, fundamental shift in mindset. We've got to move away from liability management, where leadership is only ever asking, what does this cost? Or how much did we save? Instead, we have to pivot toward human development. That means changing the core questions entirely. We need to be asking, what does this build? And who did we develop? Simply changing those fundamental questions at the very top completely alters the trajectory of the entire organization. Previous generations dreamed of a world with beauty, quality, and human development right at its center. And I want to assure you right now, that world is not gone. It hasn't vanished. It's just buried. It's buried under the loud, frantic volume of transactional management. But we have the power to change this. We just have to turn the volume down. We have to be brave enough to look at what is actually happening on the ground. And above all else, we absolutely must be willing to pay the cost for what we find. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to challenge the status quo in your own professional life. When all the dust settles and all the metrics are finally tallied up, what will actually matter? What did we build? Who did we develop? And what truth did we actually find? Thanks so much for joining me as we unpack this explainer today, and I really hope it empowers you to start seeking out the physical reality in your own world.